Good evening and welcome to the first event of the CVP at Spelman event series. I'm so excited to be here tonight. I want to first thank our partner, Customer Value Partners, which is a award-winning business and next-gen technology consulting company. I am so excited for you to meet our speaker tonight, but before we get to that, a few housekeeping rules. First, I want to make sure that everybody knows that we are recording this event and it will be shared both on the Spelman webpage and through CVP channels. So we hope that you will share this event with your colleagues and your peers so that they can also learn from our exciting speaker tonight. So I want to bring on our speaker and my guest for our fireside chat this evening, Mo Adeyoju, who is a pioneer in STEM and consulting at CVP. I don't want to share too much about Mo's background because she will do that through our chat this evening. How are you this evening, Mo?
I'm very well. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for putting this together.
Thank you for being here. So the first question that I have for you is just to tell us a little bit about your background. How did you get to where you are? I always find it fascinating the paths that people have taken to get to where they are.
Oh, absolutely. Background, my undergrad is in computer science and engineering, and I went to the University of Ife in Nigeria. And for anybody who knows about institutions in Nigeria, I personally think University of Ife is the greatest. And that's actually the school slogan is the greatest of the greatest. So that's why I got my undergrad in, like I said, computer science and engineering. And I do want to talk a little bit about computer science and engineering because what that program does is that it gives you a broad base to start with in IT, right? You do the computer science, which is where you learn about programming, you learn about computing theory, you learn about mathematical models, all of that good stuff. And then you have on the other side, you have the engineering classes, which introduce you to microchips, circuits, processors, firmware, essentially everything that you build your systems on. So for me, when I stepped out of college, I felt like I was armed with the knowledge to not only develop software systems, but also to develop the hardware and the firmware that the systems run on. And from computer science and engineering, I went on to my first working, getting a career, getting a job. And I remember one of my first jobs was in software development, actual coding. Now, the thing here is I knew from college and taking programming classes that coding was not my thing, but I still went ahead and I got a job writing code. And I very, very quickly validated that, yeah, this is not my thing. And that I think is what's exciting. One of the things exciting about STEM is there's so many paths you can go on, right? So for me, I started off with software development, not my thing. I moved into hardware support. At some point I used to go around with micro screwdrivers in my bag all the time because I was, this was in the days of huge motherboards with soldered chips, and you'd have to put things back in place when there was a problem, that sort of thing. So I did that for a while. Again, I liked it, but it wasn't my thing. And I just kept looking. And that's one of the things that I'll say to people is coming out of school, getting that first job, give yourself time to figure out what works.
Mm.
After I'd gone around for a little while, I eventually landed a role in product management. And for me, that's where things really clicked, right? Because I have an IT background, but I also understand business. So I became that bridge between what the business wanted. So looking at things like, oh, these are the products we want to put out, or these are the financial goals that we want to achieve. These are the regulatory requirements that we have to ensure that we satisfy. I would get all of that and then go kick it with the techies, right? Like with the core engineers and say, hey, this is what we need to do now. Tell me how we can make this happen. And that's where I found my sweet spot. Of course, I did that for a while, and then I, went on into two master's programs back to back. The first one was in technical communications, and then my second one was in business and information systems. And the business and information systems degree really gave me the tools, not just to design and implement new systems, but also to lead IT and engineering professionals. And that's kind of what I'm doing today. So fast forward multiple years, In my role today at CVP, I lead our project management office, quality enterprise quality management, and our service delivery to our clients. But I also manage a project. So I have a full-time project where we're modernizing two applications for a federal agency today. And I know it's been a bit of a long path, but that is my path, and that's what got me to where I am today.
So that's a really interesting story. And some of the things that I noticed in what you were just talking about is that every decision was informed by what you were experiencing in your current position, right? So it sounds to me like what you decided to study in graduate school was really informed by your experiences and the kind of skill base that you felt like you needed in order to be able to move forward. Is that correct?
Yes, absolutely. And that's one of the things, again, that I'll say to folks is it may not be 100% clear immediately, but start to form that picture for yourself of where you see yourself going. And then you intentionally look for opportunities to align yourself with where you want to get to. And that is something that has worked for me in particular. It has worked really well because I'll tell you, so I did my, when I was doing my master's in business and information systems, I was also working in a job where I could leverage what I was learning in school. So I would take a class that said, oh, this is how you manage requirements. And then I'd go to work the next day and I'm like, oh, I have to manage requirements. So the two kind of really worked well together for me. And it was a little bit of intention, but obviously there's some, good fortune on the side as well. But it was intentional, just being really focused on knowing that I wanted to go somewhere, even if I wasn't 100% clear what that place was.
Absolutely. So then that brings us to where you are, right? Government consulting, right? The title of this webinar is The Lesser Known STEM Job. I know I never was it kind of presented with government consulting as an option. So how did you get into government? Like, how did you even discover that that was an opportunity?
Oh, this is really funny. So there are two words that explain or describe how I got into government consulting, and those two words are by accident, really. Um, so back in 2008, remember when we had the financial crisis, we were living in the New York, New Jersey area. And it was one of those things where we slowly, we just watched the jobs disappear. There was just nothing. And so fast forward to 2010, and we had heard, the government jobs in Maryland, come to Maryland. I'm like, okay, well, it can't be any worse than what we're doing right now. So we packed up and we moved to Maryland. And then I started interviewing. I had no idea what government consulting was. And I always remember my very first interview. I bumped it so hard. I still cringe every time I think about, I forget the question the lady asked me. And I was so clueless that I gave you know how an interview ends after like 10 minutes and okay, I messed up. It was one of those. But I will say it has made me so much more empathetic now because I do a lot of interviewing today. So I always say to candidates, just don't worry about it, take a deep breath, just really empathize with them. Anyway, fast forward. So we moved to Maryland. I got this job with the Social Security Administration, and it was a requirements analyst role. And honestly, that's how I fell into government consulting. It wasn't, I knew I wanted to do something. I knew I wanted to go down a path. I didn't know what that path was. Moved to Maryland, interviewed for this position. It was a position with SSA, and 10 years in, no regrets. I'm still in government consulting. I don't think I'd change it for anything.
So was there a moment once you started doing government consulting where you said, that aha moment where you were like, I found what I'm supposed to be doing?
Yeah. So one of the things that I think it's important for people to know when we talk about government consulting, it's not just a job, it's not just a career, right? We're doing things that impact people's lives every single day. So if we talk about the Social Security admin position that I had, we were building an application, a system that would be used to process Social Security disability payments. So if you think about the people who receive those disability payments, those are our family members, our parents, our cousins, siblings, So we're doing things from a government consulting world. We're doing things that literally impact the lives of people every single day. So my aha moment, I have these two doctor friends, and I absolutely love them because I think they're super brilliant. Obviously, I'm not a medical practitioner, but I watch every doctor show, every cop show, every lawyer show on TV. So when the doctors are talking, I really like to listen to them. And in this one particular instance, my friend who's a pediatric ER doctor, she was talking about, oh, she was working a case and it was an EMTALA case. So I'll pause for a second. So EMTALA stands for Emergency Medical and Labor. I keep mixing up the acronym. Emergency Medical Treatment and Active Labor. This is one of the acts that was put forward in 1986 to support medical emergencies. And this, my friend was saying, oh, she had an EMTALA case and she needed to put in a request for an approval, and the timeliness of the approval would have had an impact on the patient's life essentially. And first of all, I was super excited that I even knew what EMTALA was, right? I was like, yay, I know something. But then it dawned on me that the position that I had at the time, we were developing a system which is used by the quality improvement organizations. These are groups of people who work with the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services, and they essentially look at the quality of care that is being given to Medicare beneficiaries. Mm. Medicare beneficiaries, again, our parents, our grandparents, people around us. So if, it dawned on me then that there's a scenario in which if my friend or some other medical practitioner had reached out and they had to query the system that I was responsible for developing, and they got back incorrect data because maybe we had coded in the wrong system requirements, or we were, retrieving data from an incorrect database, something, anything. If something wasn't done correctly, the outcome of that could be very negative, because we would have provided incorrect data to the doctor. The doctor would probably have taken actions based on that data, and who knows what might have happened. And so my aha moment was, it really dawned on me that my job, every single day that I get up to work, I'm doing something that ultimately has an impact, a direct impact on the lives of people around me. Mm. And that, yes, that is rewarding, that is fulfilling, but it also gives you a different sense of responsibility and accountability and ownership, because you want to make sure that you do everything correctly. You want to make sure that you do everything right, because people's lives are involved.
Mm. Yeah. I want to keep talking about your path, but I realize that we may need to do some level setting in terms of vocabulary, because I think that, myself included, when we hear that word consultant, we think of, okay, you work for yourself, but you work for CVP. So what does it mean to be a consultant, but also work for CVP?
Oh, that's a really good question. Yeah. So CVP is a management consulting firm, right? So all we do essentially is, I'll put it this way: we look at our clients' missions and their purposes, and we embrace that, and we partner with them to help them achieve what they have set out as an agency mission or what have you. So, for instance, if it's the EPA, we're looking at, okay, how can we protect the environment? How can we protect the people in the environment? So CVP as a consultant comes in, understands the company, the agency mission and the agency vision, and then we identify ways that we can really support, align, and support the agency in accomplishing what the agency is set up to do. That's where we bring the consulting services. So it could be a variety of things, right? In my case, for instance, I'm more system engineering focused. That's my niche area. So I'm going in and saying, okay, how can we implement, or how can we develop systems? How can we develop applications that can make it quicker to process, I don't know, an immigration form, or make it quicker to process the disability case, and so that somebody can get their benefits, very, very quickly. So it's looking at everything that is on the table that the government wants to do, and then finding innovative ways to bring solutions to those problems to help advance the mission of the agency.
And I could see that being really exciting because it's a very project focused position where, you could be working on
Yes.
one thing this month and then 6 months from now you're working on a completely different project.
Absolutely, yes. I mean, so I'll give you an example. So in my case, I've worked with the SSA, Social Security Administration, on the disability case processing system. I've worked with CMS on testing all of the CMS.gov websites, doing all of the testing to ensure that those websites are functioning and responding as they should be. I've worked with CMS on developing this case management. This is a case resolution system that says, okay, this is how you take in a case, this is how you adjudicate the case, and this is how you put out the results of the case. And just the going from one area to the other, the exposure, the things you learn. My days are different,
Mm.
right? Every single day is different because there's just so much out there that I'm learning and just soaking up.
So is the process of being hired at a consulting firm different than what you would experience if you were going through the hiring process for, say, I don't know, like a lab, or for a tech company even, like let's do computer science and the tech field.
So a lot of what we do, I think when it comes, especially when it comes to the interviewing for the technical skills, we're at par with what the tech industry does. Like, so if you think of a Google or Facebook or whatever, the same way they would have you come in to do a code challenge or something is how we will do the same thing. So from that perspective, we're at par with the tech world. But what is different though is we're also looking for that ability to, I know this is going to sound cliche, but to think outside the box,
Mm.
right? So to think beyond what you're seeing, to be able to connect dots, right? Because as a consultant, you're not just taking orders. You
Mm.
need to be able to go in and say, hey, this is what the problem is. These are the 5 or 6 things that we can do to resolve this problem. And this is the step, or these are the steps that we can take to get to that eventual resolution. You also have to be prepared because in a lot of instances, you're changing things and nobody likes change. People do not like change. So you have to be prepared to manage that sort of resistance as well. And that's part of your job as a consultant is what's my message? How do I deliver that message? Who
Mm.
is my audience and how do I tailor my message so that the audience gets what I'm saying? And how do I ensure that my message is communicated effectively and that it accomplishes the outcomes or the results that I want to accomplish?
Awesome. Thank you for going off on that tangent. I just felt like we needed to kind of make sure that we're all speaking about the same thing. And I don't want to assume that people understand what it means to work for a consulting firm, as opposed to being an independent consultant.
No, that was
Um,
really good because I will say, after you've been in an industry for so long, some terms just become normal to you. And then it's like, oh, wait, people don't know what that means, you know?
Absolutely. And I want to encourage our participants, if you have questions for Mo, please put them in the Q&A, and we'll definitely make sure that we get to them. So getting back to you,
Yes, ma'am.
so what are some key insights that you wish that other professionals knew about government consulting?
So I think we've touched on a few of them already. You will have opportunities to work on in so many different areas, right? So again, my focus is system engineering and software development, but there's cybersecurity, there's data science, there's healthcare transformation, there's business development. I mean, there's so many things that you have an opportunity to be exposed to. And sometimes, and I know that I was guilty of this initially. I was wired to thinking, oh, give me this job title because this is who I am. This is what I trained to be. And one of my mentors at the time, he said to me, you need to divorce yourself from the job title and do everything because that's how you expand. And at the time, I was like, what's he saying? But he was right. And it wasn't until I was able to step away from that traditional, oh, I have a job title, that I was really able to expand my horizon and then embrace so many other things. So I've done full life cycle, software development life cycle. I've worked in that area. I've worked in so many different projects that sometimes it's like connecting the dots on different projects. It's like, oh my gosh, there's a lot, you know. Um, the other thing that I would say is be prepared to learn. Again, I know it may sound cliche, but you will have to learn. My current project today is with the EPA, and I kid you not, when we started and they started to bring up the NO2 and the SO2, I'm like, okay, I need to go find my periodic table. Like I had to dig it out and read it and refresh my memory, you know, because it's, you have to keep learning. Otherwise, you sit in meetings and people talk and you have no idea what they're talking about.
Mhm.
So you always have to be learning, always have to be open to learning. And then also recognizing that in a lot of instances, you're going to have to learn a whole lot of things in a short span of time.
Mhm.
There's so much information coming at you that you're going to have to be able to find ways, your own ways, to take that information, either digest it or park it away somewhere so that you can come back to it another day and actually read it and understand what you're seeing, you know? So a lot to learn in a short space of time, figure out techniques for your own self, or how you can learn and how you best absorb information. And then one more, um, you'll interface with a lot of senior people, and
Mhm.
if you're not prepared for that, that can be daunting. So be prepared to, you know, just understand that you're going to deal with senior level people. If you're prepared for it, it's not as overwhelming when you find yourself in it. But walking into it for the first time, it's like, oh my gosh, I can't say a word because all of these people are so, you know, fantastic. I don't know what to say to them.
Can you talk a little bit more about that? Because I know we have some Spelman students on here as well who may not, I think sometimes until you've experienced that, you don't really understand, like, what would it mean to prepare differently to be in a meeting with senior level kind of executives?
So it's that what I talked about before, it's that learning, right? So as an example, if you're getting ready to go into a meeting, you want to make sure that you are fully aware what the meeting is going to be talking about. If there's any materials, make sure you've read them. Google is your best friend. If you don't know it, Google it real quick. Make sure you have, you know, you're paying attention to those kinds of things so that if you're sitting in a room and they start to throw out technical terms, you at least can decipher what those technical terms mean. And
Mm.
then also being confident, like it's okay to speak up and it's okay to ask questions. And I think I see that a lot, especially with some of the, you know, graduates that we get in at CVP, really super bright, very intelligent people. But I often see a hesitation to speak up. So my thing is I'm always encouraging people, ask. There's no such thing as a dumb question. Ask, ask, ask. So preparation for meetings with senior people is make sure you at least have as much information as you can get by yourself. Know it's okay to ask questions and be prepared to ask questions and just be confident in who you are.
I think that that's a nice uh, time to move to this question that just came into the chat, because what I hear you saying is that it's a very exciting career because you're working on lots of different things. And because you're working on lots of different things, there's a constant need to be ready to learn new materials. So the question that came into the chat is that, do you feel that your career allows for work-life balance? And if not, how do you create work-life balance for yourself?
So the answer to both parts is yes. So I'll answer. So do I feel like my career allows for work-life balance? The answer is yes. The other part to that is CVP also strongly encourages work-life balance. But I think what's important to understand is work-life balance for me as an individual may be different from what work-life balance is for you as an individual. So the first thing is recognizing what is that balance that I'm looking for.
Mm.
And those are the lessons that I had to learn. Because I'll be honest, at some point I felt like if I worked longer hours and, you know, if I did silly things like send emails at 2:30 a.m., it would show that I was working and that was what people were expecting. Until I realized that no, that's not the bar. So I had to figure out for myself, what does work-life balance mean? So some days I start really early and I end late. Some days I work longer hours and I take a day off. You know, so you just have to figure yourself out. And that I think is the key thing. And I think that answers the second part about how do I create work-life balance. It's just actively managing my own time and learning to say no.
Mm.
It's okay to say no, right? Or it's okay to renegotiate a deadline or a timeline. I can't do it today, but I can get to it on Wednesday. Does that still work for you? Typically, the answer you'll get is yes, but a lot of the times we're afraid to ask because we don't want to come across as though, we're not available to help and support. But if you can be bold enough to say, okay, I'm not able to do this today, but I can do it on Thursday. Is that okay? You know, that's one way to address that.
I love that. And I think that that's something that, that's not just a challenge within consulting, right? That's a challenge as young people move into careers, is kind of finding their voice with wherever they decide to go, and being comfortable speaking and letting their presence be known, right? I always say, and it's not a saying that I came up with, but how you start is how you finish, right? So if you
Mm-hmm.
come into a company or an organization being the yes person, it is very difficult to stop being that yes person, because that's who people come to know you as. So I really like that you said that it's okay to say no, but you're not just saying no, you're giving another option, right?
Correct.
It's a no and. I really like that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Exactly.
We have a question in the Q&A.
Okay.
So you mentioned connecting the dots. That process just doesn't occur in a vacuum. What processes did you employ to learn how to connect the dots?
That is a really good question. I'm going to have to think about that because it's after a while, something just becomes second nature. But I think so I'll use my current project as an example. We got this work and we started doing the work, and I personally did not know a whole lot about, I mean, I knew about the EPA, but I didn't know all the details behind it. So I had to spend some time learning about the organization, about the agency. What are they doing? What's important to them? What do they care about? And then take it down to this group that I'm going to be working with. What matters to them? So it's taking that step back first and getting the complete picture. So taking that holistic view of everything first, and then you can start to segment off and say, okay, this is section one. This, part does A, B, C, and D. This is section two. Section two does E, E, F, and G, or whatever. And so if you have the segments, you can then connect those dots to say, okay, if I do something on the left side, it'll impact something else on the right side. And that's really just, I don't know that there is a process. I think it's more like just learning to take a step back, learning to assess the whole and not just diving into one slice or one aspect of the work that you're doing or whatever it is you're engaged in. Because what I see often too is a lot of the times people just want to, let's just get in there and do things. Let's just get in there and get started. No, take that step back first and do that sort of environmental scan. Make sure you have a complete picture of, the vision of whatever it is you're trying to accomplish. Then you can narrow your focus, and then you can get down to the very, very, minute details.
Hmm. And am I correct in assuming that you're working on a team on these projects? So
Yes.
how does that connecting the dots kind of work within the team?
Okay, so I'll again use my project. So when we started, one of the things that I had my teams do was we created these, I'll call them the as is business state. So this is what happens today. And then the to be state, this is where we want to get to. This is the future that we want to get to. This is what we want to build. That's part of your initial assessment, right? What exists? Where do we want to go? What are the differences? So I always start off with, let's do a gap assessment.
Hmm.
What do we know? What do we not know? And then what are the differences? That's where we start. Once we know what we don't know, then we can then start to, excuse me, figure out how to get answers to those questions. So that's how, from a team perspective, again, I'm software engineering focused, so I will use software engineering examples, but this can really be used anywhere. From a team perspective, I would have the technical folks like the solution architects go in and do an environmental scan. What is in the environment? What's available from a development perspective? What do we have? What do we need? Right? And then have on the business side do the same thing, because those two elements give you the complete picture of the technical and the business. Then you can start to dive into the details behind that to figure out what work needs to happen. Once you know what work needs to happen, the next step is to prioritize. And that's the other thing that I'll say is recognize that it's impossible to do everything. You're never going to get everything done. So learn how to prioritize, learn how to set, this is the goal we're trying to accomplish. What are we going to do first in support of accomplishing that goal? That helps you move forward really, really quickly.
Love it. Love it. So, what do you know now that you wish you knew when you got into government consulting?
How much time do you have? um, I think it's government consultant it's not just a job or a series of jobs. It's truly something that you can grow a career in because you're helping to solve big problems.
Mm.
And in helping to solve big problems, you're learning to think, you're learning to innovate, you're learning to ideate, you're learning to, find solutions that may not be so obvious. So there's a lot of brain power, I guess. You're thinking about things and noodling and trying to figure out how do I solve this problem. So that's one thing that I've learned is that it's not just I'm just going to do this job. No, it's truly a career. The second thing, I think it's that quality is key. Now, I get it. Quality is key, is important in every industry. But if you go back to the example that I gave before of some of the things that we do as government consultants have real life impacts. You have to be extra diligent, pay attention to details, make sure that you're, checking and double checking everything to ensure that you put the best thing out there. Quality is absolutely critical. And then the last thing is, and I like how you touched on this before, um, how you start is how you're going to finish, right? It's so important to recognize that. And also recognize that as a government consultant, when you start, you are building a brand.
Mm.
So you may not be working for yourself, but ultimately you're building a brand that represents you. And the more you do stuff, the more you expand and build out your brand. So be very intentional about the things that you're saying yes to. Be
Mm.
very intentional and strategic and in aligning opportunities that are presented to you, because you will get a lot, but make sure the right opportunities are the ones that you say yes to because they align with your vision for yourself as you evolve and as your career grows. That last one is something that I wish I had known when I started, because I'd have said no to some things, but I just didn't know better at the time.
Mm. Yeah, I would love for you to talk a little bit more about that in terms of, developing your personal brand. I feel like that's something that our students would find really interesting. Like, what are some of the mistakes that you see students making, or some of the things that you've learned on your own about the importance of kind of personal brand development?
It's I'll use myself as an example. So often at times there's a tendency to want to impress people,
Mm.
right? And you think that the more I say yes to every ad hoc assignment or every ad hoc task that is presented to me, the more I am building my brand. But ultimately, what really counts is that you want to be known as an expert in something. Now, that may not be the only thing you know, but you do want to be known as an expert in something with the understanding that being an expert in something enables you to branch out into other things.
Mm.
So, figuring out what that something is, that's where you start with building your brand. And then it's like, once you know what that core thing is, what that something is, you can then add to it, right? If I said, for instance, I'm a system engineer, okay, well, now I'm going to go into agile software development, and then I'm going to go into project management, and then so on and so forth. It's recognizing that at the core of who I am, I'm a system engineer,
Mm.
right? But everything else that I've built over time is in support of my ability to build systems.
Mm. I like that. Yeah. I think, you know, this generation is much more comfortable with changing careers and changing jobs. But I think what you just said is really important, is that looking for that thread that is consistent throughout is really important. Because if you are in an interview and somebody notices, well, you were here for a year, but then you were here, you need to be able to say, but the thread is at the core, as you said, I am a systems engineer. I think
Right.
that that's really important. So while we're waiting for more questions to come in, I would love for you to talk about, we're at Spelman College. Our community is always interested to hear about the experiences of Black women in STEM. Can you talk about what it is like to be a Black woman in government consulting?
So one of the first challenges that I had to, and I'm going to own part of this. Maybe some of it was, what I had internalized, but for the longest time, I didn't think I had a voice. I thought I had to defer, right? I had to let other people take the glory or take the credit. And so there were cases where I would, put in time, put in energy, do the work, and then somebody else talks about it, and somebody else, you know, is seen as though they did the work.
Mm.
And I realized over time that that was because I wasn't confident enough as an IT person, as a woman of color, as a woman in an IT environment, which is at the time male dominated, right? And so I had to figure that out. I had to find my own voice. And then once I found my voice, I had to figure out what my voice wanted to say.
Mm.
What's important to me? What do I want to convey? If I'm in a meeting and I say something and what I say is brushed off to the side, and the gentleman next to me says the exact same thing and it's accepted, how do I want to react to that? Do I want to react to that? What's the best way to react to that? And some of these things are, they seem like silly things, little things, but these are the things that if, as women, if we're not careful, these things will hold us back because sometimes we don't even know we're doing it.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That kind of goes back to what you were speaking about before in terms of finding your voice within the environment. Um, yeah. So if I'm a sophomore at Spelman College and I'm listening to you talk and I'm like, oh, this sounds really interesting. Are there things that I could be doing to prepare myself for a future in government consulting?
That's another really good question. To prepare yourself for a job in government consulting. Honestly, I think it's all of the things that I've talked about. So, for instance, I keep saying this. So, CVP has a fantastic college hire program.
Mm.
And one of the things that we do is we get a lot of our senior people to meet with and interview college graduates before they come into the company. And then after the interviews are over, we all kind of get back together and we talk about, okay, what did we see? What did we like? And the things that always shine in those interviews is people who were able to, so we had, let me give an example. We have some exercises that we have them do. And those are exercises where there's no right or wrong answer. It's just we want to see how you process things. And so the people who always come out on top are the people who are able to follow a logical path and say, this was a problem you gave me. This is how I thought about it. And this is the conclusion that I came to. It doesn't matter if your conclusion is incorrect. It's that path that you took. That's what we're looking for. So if you want to prepare yourself for coming into government consulting, I would say learn how to analytical thinking. It's critical. Learn how to look at things, understand, analyze information so that you can, my favorite phrase, connect the dots. Because there's a lot of connecting of dots because a lot, you don't want to just take a slice and that slice is the only thing that you're considering. You want to make sure that you're always taking a step back and seeing that big picture. And so prepare yourself by understanding what the big picture is, knowing what it is to look for the big picture. Um, have that analytical mindset, have that curious mindset too, right? Well, if I have this problem, what if I tried this solution? Again, not all the solutions you propose will be perfect or will be accurate or will be on point, but it's that process. It's to show that you have that ability to think about things and come to conclusions, have a logical path or a logical process that you use to solve problems.
Beautiful, beautiful. And so would you say that, because I know, you have a graduate degree, would you say that a graduate degree is required or necessary to be able to move into government consulting?
I don't think it's required.
Mhm.
I know lots of people who don't have graduate degrees. It's not required. It helps without a doubt, but I don't think it's required. But I do see, especially in the last few years, I do see quite a few of the college graduates come in, actually go on to take graduate degrees because they recognize that it helps.
Mm,
But what I say to them typically is work for a few years first, because that first job is probably not going to be the job,
mm,
right? It's just a starting point. So work for a few years first, try a few different areas until you find your niche, and then you can then go do a graduate degree or pursue a graduate degree in that area that, that's your thing.
mhm. Beautiful. So we have another question in the chat. So it says, I'm a mid-career professional with a doctorate in psychology. How can I apply my expertise in STEM? And I'm going to add to that in government consulting. Are there opportunities for somebody that has a doctorate in psychology?
There's nothing like the perfect question because I have the perfect answer. So one of my colleagues at CVP is someone who was a nurse. She is a doctor. I mean, she has I'm sorry, doctorate as well.
Hmm.
And she worked as a nurse for many, many years. And now she's in IT and she's an IT product manager. And the reason why I say that, and for the person who asked the question, please go on the CVP website. If you go into the blogs that we have, there's a blog by Dr. Brenda Blunt. I forget the title of the blog, but you should read that because she talks about her career transitioning from nursing to IT product management, some of the similarities that she was able to leverage, and some of the things that she felt she had to do to ensure her own success in that area. So the short answer to the question is you can absolutely apply your expertise in STEM. One of the things that I would encourage is surround yourself with people who are, IT professionals or professionals in some STEM capacity or the other, because you'll learn from them. Again, be prepared to learn. It's going to be new, it's going to be different, but be prepared to learn. And then the other thing that I would recommend is taking what you know and then finding similarities with whatever you want to do in a STEM area, because you can always apply the same methodologies or the same processes or the same, steps in a STEM career. And that's one of the things that Dr. Blunt's blog talks about, how she had to, first of all, look at nursing and then identify the nursing skills and all the things that she knew from a nursing perspective, and then apply that to IT product management. And that was one way that she could become successful. So surround yourself with people who are professionals in this area, be prepared to learn, and then identify similarities between what you already know and what you want to get into, because that's where you can find you can leverage what you already know and apply it in this new area.
Yeah, I think that that's a really important point in terms of helping people to understand that tech companies, government consulting companies, even if their core focus is a STEM field, that does not mean that everybody that works there has a degree in a STEM field, right?
Oh no, right. I have I have somebody on my team who she joined us, I want to say August of last year. She has a BA in international affairs. And today she's implementing tools and doing things in an IT environment. And I remember she first came in and she was like, I don't know this stuff. And I'm like, it's okay. And that's another advantage of our college hire program is we surround you with people, we surround you with experienced professionals who can help you navigate that path. Because we recognize that it doesn't just happen overnight. And we've all been through and we've made our mistakes. So a lot of us at CVP are very passionate about ensuring that for the college hired folks coming in, or even the newer people coming in, we want to surround you and make sure that we protect you. So you get so much support, you'll be like, okay, I've had enough.
That's so can you talk a little bit about the college hiring process? Like, is it something where, or even, I know that, we probably have people in our community that would try to think about, okay, well, are there things I should be doing in the summer? What is that kind of onboarding process?
Yeah, so honestly, my first piece of advice, and I'm saying this because I see this a lot, is apply early. Start looking for jobs early. By summer, most firms already know who they're bringing in, right? So make sure you apply early and make sure you start that process early. Um, so from CVP's perspective, we have two reach outs that we do every year, and we essentially go to the universities of like Spelman, and we put ourselves out there, advertise. For instance, I would go to a college for the entire day and just talk to people all day long, back to back, all day long, just talk to them about CVP. So that if we do, if it works out, you come into the company, we set you up with a mentor. We set you up with, obviously, if that's the field you're going into, we put you on a project, but then we set you up with a mentor and an advisor. And those two people, their primary focus is setting you up for success. So those are the people that you can go to if you have questions, if you're unsure about something, if you're, whatever. And then we also provide a lot of training, because it's one thing to learn in school, it's a whole other thing to work in a professional environment. So we recognize that. We set up people with a lot of training and just, put them through the paces. So your first few months is we're really helping to, connect, tie all the pieces together. So everything you've learned in school, now this is real life, this is how it applies.
That's so, that transition from the abstract kind of simulated world of learning to the real world can be a challenge for many, many college students. So that's
Yes.
wonderful that you all have so many supports around you. So back to talking about you, we have a question. So
Okay.
as you have been strategic and thoughtful in your career planning, did you have to be patient to get to where you are, or do you think you can skip steps along the way?
Well, you can certainly skip steps. I would not recommend it though. um, you have to be patient. You have to be patient with yourself first and foremost. And that's one of the things that I had to learn, was I always felt like I was 2 paces behind. And one of my mentors said to me, how about you reframe things? How about you look at what you've accomplished versus what you have not accomplished? And I remember thinking, ain't that something, but that's really what it is. So first of all, be patient with yourself. Recognize too that as an individual, you evolve, right? Something that makes sense or appeals to you today, maybe in a year, maybe in 2 years, not the same. So give yourself that room to be flexible, to be able to respond to yourself as you evolve. Because if you don't do that, it's always going to be a struggle, it's like a constant struggle. And then I will say, honestly, I have periods where I just reflect, right? And those, when I say reflect, I mean like seriously reflecting. Is this what I should be doing? Is this what I want to be doing? What else can I be doing? So for me, it's like every 6 months, I take a few, a few days here and there, and I just say, okay, what am I doing? What have I done in the last 6 months? What's my goal been? How close am I to accomplishing or meeting my goals? And if I'm not, where do I need to course correct? I just getting into that cadence. I mean, I'm so serious about this. I have a reminder on my calendar. I know I'm a bit nerdy, but I do, because I realize too that if you're not intentional about such things, right, life will happen. Life doesn't stop. And then you wake up and it's 3 years in and you're like, how did I get here?
So you just used the word intentional, and in the question, the participant used the word strategic. As you were moving through your career, were you thinking about it in that way, or were you kind of just following what you felt was the next natural step?
I think in the beginning, I was following what I felt was the next natural step.
Mm-hmm.
But as I got older and wiser and smarter and all that, I started to be more like, okay, what should my next step be?
Mm-hmm.
And so it was part of my evolution was recognizing, okay, I can't just follow that thing anymore. I have to sort of carve out my path or help define my path as I go along.
So do you feel like, I'm just making notes so I don't forget, because
Mm-hmm.
that's that's like, when you think about like the archetype of the hero's journey, right? Like, it's at what point do you transition from life leading you to you leading your life? Is there, like, was there a moment like that where you made that transition? Like, how did that happen?
It was when I realized that I was saying yes to everything without thinking about why am I doing this? And that's
Mm,
why I said before, it's okay to learn, you haven't learned to say no, right? Because I got to a point where, and that's one more thing that I will say that I haven't, if I haven't said this, find yourself mentors. Find, as women, find female mentors, find male, whatever, surround yourself with mentors. Because another one of my mentors, she's a lady, and she actually said to me, it's okay to say no, right? I'm like, wait, what? People do that? And she phrased it in a way that just helped clarify things for me. And it was essentially, if you keep saying yes to everything, you're leaving bits of yourself all over the place.
mm,
But if you figure out where you want to go and then you say yes to the things that support your path, then you're developing yourself.
mm. So let's talk about mentors for a moment. What should a student be looking for in a mentor?
So I think that changes depending on where you are at points in your career. So CVP has a mentor program.
Mhm.
And one of the things that we do with that mentor program is we recognize that you may need a mentor for a moment in time, and that's okay. So if you need a mentor for this particular thing, find that person, work with that person, but recognize again that your needs may evolve. And this first mentor may no longer be able to satisfy,
Mm,
help you along the way. And it's okay to find other mentors. What should you be looking for? People who are where you want to go,
mm,
whether it is from a career perspective or personal life, whatever. People who are already there, because you want to learn from them what their journey was. And in learning what their journey was, you can learn what you need to be doing, what you need to not be doing, and then use that information to help guide your own path.
beautiful. So we only have a few more minutes. So what's next for you? What are you excited about that's coming up in your role as a government consultant?
That's another really good question. What's next for me? I'm getting more and more into the project management side of things. And um, for me now, it's expanding that. So it's expanding that and then expanding that horizon to not just managing projects, but managing entire programs, managing entire portfolios, because that for me, from a career perspective, that's a next natural thing. And so part of my day to day now is consciously saying to myself, what are the things that I should be doing or that I need to be doing to set me up for that next thing? So, who do I need to be meeting with? Who do I need to be talking to? Who do I need to be learning from? All that good stuff so that I can be prepared for that next step.
So that's a perfect um, segue into my final question, because the goal is always to advance in your career. And so how did you make that transition from the technical side of work to the management kind of leadership side?
Mentors. I kid you not. Again, so I remember this real life experience. I remember at some point when I was at CVP, I was unsettled. And I thought, you know how sometimes you can get in your own head and it's like, oh, they've forgotten all about me. I'm just gonna, rot on this little project. Nobody's ever gonna remember me. All of that was going on. And I remember getting an email from one of my mentors and he goes, can we meet up for coffee? And I'm like, because your boss calls you in for coffee, you're like, okay, something is wrong. And then he said to me, and I'll never forget this, he said to me, I've been thinking about you and thinking about what's next for you. These are the options that I think you need to consider.
Mm.
And I was like, wow, okay. And he laid out the options and helped me understand what each one was, and then helped me paint a, if I do this, this is what could potentially happen. If I do this other thing, this is what could potentially happen. So in this particular case, I wasn't even thinking that way, but because I had these people who were, I guess, vested in me, right? He came up with a plan and said, these are the options that you can consider.
Mm.
What would you like to do? And I chose the one that I wanted, and that was my transition into more of the management side of the house.
Beautiful. So my final question for you as we wrap up this wonderful evening, where I know I have learned a lot, not just about government consulting, just about career development. Is there anything that we haven't talked about that you wish people knew about a job in government consulting?
I'm thinking, I think I've packed everything into the last, what, 1 hour. If there was anything that I would reinforce or reiterate, it's that government consulting is not just a job. It's not, it's not a 9 to 5 clock in, clock out. It's something that you put your entire self into, because you'll find yourself, if you really engage and embrace the vision of the agency that you're working with, you'll find yourself thinking about them, thinking about the agency, and thinking about how you can make things better. And then if you understand that behind that agency, the people that you're really serving are your family members and your friends, your cousins, your siblings, or whatever, it makes it that much more, important. So government consulting is not just a job. It's truly a career. It's truly a place where you find fulfillment, and it's rewarding because you're doing things. It's bigger than you. You're doing things that serve a bigger purpose.
I love it. Mo, thank you so much for your candor and your honesty during this last hour with me. I'm sure that our audience has a lot of takeaways. I want to thank everybody for taking time out of your busy schedule to be with us this evening. As I mentioned at the beginning, this event has been recorded and will be posted both on the Spelman website and the CVP website. I did put in the chat the link to the blog post that Mo mentioned. I encourage you to read that post and understand more about CVP, as well as about how people are making the transition from other careers into a career in government consulting. So with that, I will say good night and thank you for joining us.